Innovation's a funny thing, in a cosmic sort of way. While it drives your business forward, it also exposes new risks that can slow you down. As an IT or security professional, every day you need to know, are you vulnerable? Are you compromised? And finally, are you optimized to quickly spot and resolve issues to keep your operation humming? It's your responsibility to help the organization safely and reliably implement the latest connected technologies. So how can you outsmart this little paradox? Rapid7 solutions are powered by advanced analytics and an unmatched understanding of the attacker's mindset. Visit rapid7.com to learn more about how Rapid7 products transform data into action. Today's determined attackers easily bypass even the most advanced network defenses. Trying to ramp up staff to detect their backdoors can cost thousands of dollars and take months, even years. With Active Countermeasures AI Hunter, we enable junior analysts to detect even the most advanced backdoors in a matter of hours. Sign up for a demo and purchase our product today by visiting activecountermeasures.com/BSW. Active Countermeasures. Make every analyst a hunter. Domain tools help security analysts turn threat data into threat intelligence. They take indicators from your network, including domains and IP addresses, and connect them with nearly every active domain on the internet. Those connections drive risk assessments, help profile attackers, guide online fraud investigations, and map cyber activity to attacker infrastructure. Fortune 1000 companies, global government agencies, and leading security solutions vendors use the Domain Tools platform as a critical ingredient in their threat investigations and proactive defenses. For more information, visit securityweekly.com/domain tools. Welcome back, everyone, to Business Security Weekly. Just a note, check out our fine friends at itpro.tv, itpro.tv/security weekly for all of your training needs. Great supplement to all your other training activities. You can buy a subscription for your business and get all your employees access to 3,300 hours or more of security training. So make sure you do that. I want to talk about some of the happenings in security companies and security startups and acquisitions today. I think Matt and I probably will start with the RSA acquisition of FortScale, which on the surface now, Matt, and I know you've analyzed this, you used to work for RSA, I believe, right? And it seems to me that UEBA, the end user or user entity behavior analytics, was a thing where people created whole companies around this concept of analyzing your user behavior for security events. I think largely that's gone from a category to a feature. And the recent string of acquisitions and exits from these companies are either they're exiting via acquisition or they're pivoting to do something else in addition to stay alive and not get acquired and continue to grow. And certainly with RSA, NetWitness now basically just bought this functionality of end user behavior analytics, and we've seen a lot of these SIM companies making acquisitions like this. Is that your assessment on the surface as well, Matt?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've known the user behavior analytics was a feature, not necessarily a full category. Makes sense to integrate that into the SIM technologies, which is the basis here, the NetWitness platform being that platform for RSA. And so what you're seeing is you're starting to see the consolidation of what people thought was a market, but really was just a feature. And there's other examples out there, but this one is really starting to play itself through. And there's an article out on Calculist that kind of breaks this one down. So I want to read a couple sentences here because I think it's really interesting to see kind of how this deal went down. So it says the Israeli-based startup was acquired for less than investors had put into the company. A person familiar with the matter told Calculist. Okay, so $23 million in, RSA paid less than that. So this is a good deal for them.
Right. Yep.
Some of the FortScale 30 employees will be transferred to RSA's Research and Development Center in Israel. That's been built over the years. RSA's done a number of acquisitions in Israel and actually has a really good focus there. And then it says FortScale's founder and chief executive, Aiden Tendler, will not remain with the company. So think of this as an acqui-hire, I think, at the end of the day. So that's how this one played out.
They bought their technology and a certain percentage of their R&D and developers, and then the rest of the people assuming got some kind of exit money, right? They basically bought them out and said, you can go off and do your next startup now.
Yeah, it doesn't get into details in the article, but yes, that's basically it. And this functionality, which makes sense, will get integrated into the NetWitness suite, I'm sure, and will enhance some of the analytics within the NetSuite product, the NetWitness product. So yeah, it makes perfect sense, but not a good exit for FortScale at the end of the day.
No,
but a great acquisition for RSA because they got it on the cheap.
Well, and I think this goes back to our conversation about risk. Certainly, they were banking on the fact that UEBA would become a category of its own. They were banking on that they could do it better than anyone else and become that category king. As everything unfolded, turns out that's not the case. At least they were able to exit, right? I mean, there is risk, sure, but you were able to exit. Not clear how financially they were impacted by that, but hopefully they came out of it. Not in the red, certainly, and can, like I said, go off and do their next startup. So, but that's one of those risky things that we were talking about in the last segment.
Yeah, exactly. And when you pay less than what the investors in, typically that money goes back to pay investors, not necessarily founders.
Yeah.
But hopefully they took care of some of the founding team. But
right.
You never know.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of the risk here is preference.
Right. So what do we want to talk about next? I thought this one was interesting. FIDE raises $3 million in seed funding. It's essentially a security app for iOS. Now, I know that oftentimes funding for apps is pretty tight because there's just so many apps for Android and iOS and so many companies that are like, we're going to be the next most popular app in the App Store. And that's just not the case because it's a very crowded market. In this case, they give $3 million in seed funding to not just an app, but a security app, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, my concern here, though, is my CTO, Asif Awan, actually exited that did something similar, right? It was an app wrapping technology for iOS and Android to protect applications.
Mm-hmm.
Aruba bought it. So it's part of the HP Aruba side of the house.
HPE Aruba.
Right. Sorry.
I caught up with them in Boston a few weeks ago.
And so what's interesting here is now you've got another startup. There's already been a couple exits in this space. So is there still really a big demand for this? Because there are other technologies out there that do this. It's a good seed round, $3 million in seed funding. But the question will be, can they get an A? I just don't. I don't know that this. I don't know. I'm not sure that this has legs. I've seen other stuff already here. Other people have solved the application security issues in iOS. This is not unique in any way. So we'll see.
Yeah, this seems to be a separate app that can protect the consumer against phishing and account takeover attacks. In the startups that you talked about, I know of another one. That does we basically provide developers with a wrapper that provides a security abstraction layer. And that sounds like what the company you were describing, and it sounds like there's other startups in that realm. This one's targeted at consumers, which that's going to be somewhat of a tough sell to convince consumers that they need, security, and not only need security, you got to download this other app to get, some security protections.
Yeah, exactly. Consumer space is tough, I think, in some respects. So I try to stay away from there. But like I said, we'll see. But I'm not convinced yet.
BetterCloud closes a $60 million funding round to bring their total to $107 million. They're touted as a SaaS operations management platform.
I'd never heard of these guys before. And so when I was out doing the research, I'm like, who do they compete with? I'm like, I don't know this space that well. And the best way I could think about describing it is a CASB for SaaS applications or something, right? I mean, they're trying to provide a level of security and compliance around people accessing SaaS apps. This is a Series E round, right? So they've raised a number of rounds. The total's over 100 million now to help them scale. I couldn't really understand some of the value here, unfortunately, when I kind of went to their website. So I don't know how this plays out in the long run, but good for them. They took an E.
Yeah, right. They must be doing something. Well, if they're in need, they have customers right, that are
Right, exactly.
benefiting from the solution. So, um, it looks like this might be an Israeli-based startup. At least one of the investment firms is an Israeli ventures. This is ContGuard. It says they're the leading provider of supply chain shipment monitoring and business intelligence services. I think that's pretty fascinating. I think anytime we've looked at least that I've looked at securing your supply chain, it's kind of like a Hollywood script, right? Especially when you do threat modeling for your supply chain. Like, it's who's going to poison the supply chain, who's going to hijack the supply chain. We covered one of a somewhat funny article and interesting where they were going after the marijuana supply chain in Washington State and actually hacked the state of Washington, the system that controls where people have to register the source and destination and times when shipments are moving. That all has to be registered with the state, and they attack the database seemingly to hijack shipments of marijuana that is legal in Washington State. So anytime we talk about this, protecting the supply chain, the threat modeling is like totally out of a Hollywood script, right?
Yeah, and this is the other version of container security when you think about moving, large cargoes all over the place on big ships, which are all containerized, right? And so the name's interesting because it's ContGuard, which kind of reminds me of, they're trying to guard the container shipments.
Yeah.
So I just chalked this up to the other container security.
Right. Yeah, it is the other container, and I'm sure that those containers are tagged with some type of wireless RFID or some similar technology to track where the container goes. And if you're a large company and you're moving shipments like that, I think you absolutely need some type of solution that's protecting your supply chain. It's just such a mission critical part of your business is how your goods and supplies are moving through various countries, crossing borders, and being able to track all of that and apply security to it. Especially if you're in the food and beverage industry. How do you protect from contamination? How do you protect from an attack where someone's going to threaten or maybe act upon a threat that poisons some of your shipments? And when I've seen that happen in the past, they have to pull product off shelves. They have to pull product out of the supply chain and basically get rid of it and destroy it because it could have been contaminated. So I think there's a different kind of security aspect here to this. It's interesting.
Very interesting space.
In the embedded device realm, I had not heard of. Have you heard of Red Balloon before?
No, I figured if anybody did, you would,
right?
Mr.
Yeah.
Embedded Security Guy, right? Yeah.
Haven't heard of them before. They're apparently a world leader. Everyone's the world leader. Like whenever there's a press release, you're always, whatever space you're in, you're the leader. You're the world leader. And Red Balloon is the world leader in embedded device security today. It received a Series A of $21.9 million. I really haven't looked into it much more than that.
But this is a big Series A. I mean, 21.9, that's more like a Series B. So I haven't dug into the analysis here on revenue and some other things, but I'm curious, how much revenue they have. To me, this is a really big A. A's usually aren't this big. 10, 12, maybe, but 21, no, this is big. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. They're going after the embedded device IoT market. Obviously, somebody was going to go here eventually. I'm not sure how they do it yet in their technology stack. That's a research project for you. You should take a look at what are they doing.
Yeah. So the website, one of the websites we rely upon is Owler. And there certain pages on Owler today just aren't responding. So I was dealing with that problem and not able to really dig into some of these companies. So, but speaking of Series A, Matt, what is, in your opinion, what's a normal Series A and what's a larger Series A? And then the follow on is like, what conditions exist for a company to get a really big Series A?
Yeah, and we've got one more story here that is a typical A, right? To me, an A is 5 to 8 million. 6, 7 is kind of where I like it because there's a couple factors that you have to think about when you're raising funds, and we've done shows on this before in the past. is you got to think about when you take a round, what's the valuation to the revenue to think about the exit side, right? And so the bigger A you take without revenue, the multiples start to get a little out of whack. And if you take too big of an A without revenue, then what starts to happen is you start to lock yourself out of strategic acquisition deals because the expectation of the investor and the revenue are misaligned, right?
So wait,
there's
it's kind
ratios
of
that you have to deal with.
It's kind of like being upside down on your mortgage.
Yeah, kinda.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you take a $21.9 million A, for example, assume a 4x. That means you're putting an $80 million plus valuation on the business. Divide by 10, you should be driving $8 million worth of revenue. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's a simple math, right?
Gotcha.
If those metrics aren't in place, you just made it really, really hard to get acquired.
Yeah.
As an exit point.
Right.
Which means, look, you're going to raise more money, and you're going to have to eventually show that revenue traction to get there. Now, take the other side, right? Let's say, you raise $5 million. Now that's a 20. Divide by 10. Now I got to get to $2 million of revenue with a $5 million in to be considered a strategic acquisition. Again, just simple math, but that's the math founders have to play sometimes,
right,
to understand how much to raise or how little to raise based on where you are in your revenue streams, right? So you take the last article, which is another Denver security startup. Woohoo! Love the Colorado startups.
Oh, is this ThreatX?
Yeah, ThreatX.
Okay. Yeah.
No. So I mean, Colorado's had a good little startup community here on the north side of town, primarily in Tech Center, Denver, up through the Boulder exchange, and so ThreatX, another one. This one's 8.2 million. That's what I would expect an A to look like.
Yeah,
that makes sense to me, right? And GrowTech and Access Venture Partners, both Colorado funds here. They've done a number of deals locally. Great little Thrive. I actually I had a call with Brett a few weeks back. We're actually discussing some of the data Layered Insight has and how that might enhance some of the stuff they're doing on the WAF
side. I wanted to ask you what your assessment was of their play in the market, because they're touting themselves as a WAF for cloud-based solutions, and how does that tie into container security? How does that tie into your AWS strategy and how you deploy? How does this tie in today? I think most of us in the security community have kind of poo-pooed the WAF in a traditional sense. I think we're almost seeing a reemergence of it, maybe in the cloud, but also I see a reemergence in protecting some legacy applications and being a good application for that, especially as we move forward in the DevOps process. Those legacy applications are like, yeah, we're getting rid of those. We're writing new apps, but I need something in the meantime to protect my legacy apps. That's typically when I'll recommend a WAF. How does this play into the cloud, though?
Yeah, so it's a combination of cloud and I think some hybrid stuff. I mean, we know that there are some older technologies in the space that haven't really addressed aspects of the cloud infrastructure that well. You're actually seeing also container-specific WAFs, like what NuVector is doing, for example. They're trying to create this WAF between the containers. From my understanding, that's not what these guys are doing, right? They're trying to fill a gap of customers who need, more feature functionality to support their new applications as they're moving them to the cloud. They might also be bridging some aspects of on-prem and hybrid. Really is kind of a replacement for Imperva. I think, realistically, right? I mean, Imperva's kind of stuck a little bit in where they've been. And so this is kind of the next evolution of that. There still is a need. When we talk about Layered Insight, we're container specific, right? So we're in the container, we're monitoring all this activity in the container. We're not sitting on the top side, right? And so, having a WAF up there in certain cases probably still makes sense in certain areas. And so then how do the two play together? How does information that we have help improve the WAF because they're protecting kind of the front door? And so that's where I see some of these technologies kind of fitting in. But we'll see where we go. I know the team's pretty excited.
The question that I often get in this context is when we talk about, well, should I have a WAF for my web application? Should I put some type of agent either or code or hook inside of my container, inside of my application, right? We're talking about RASP and all those technologies. I think the most commonly asked question is, how does that impact performance? And certainly that's my question, having rolled out apps here at Security Weekly and having websites, like you put anything in between the end user and that application, now that's just another bump in the road for performance. And how do we achieve that? And certainly I get the question from developers, I get it from IT ops, and I get it from security. Even security is worried about, I don't want to implement a solution that's going to impact performance, because then I'm the bad guy now, and that's bad. I don't want to mess with our mission critical applications. So how do we combat performance, Matt?
Yeah, you're going to get a chance to test this out a little bit in a week or two. So we should revisit this conversation, right?
I'm excited.
But you're right. We have to figure out how to keep latency and impact to performance low. And there are some examples of some of this that we've seen in the past, right? So think about the APM vendors, New Relic and App Dynamics, right, that are doing a level of instrumentation in the containers to do application performance monitoring.
Mm-hmm.
It's a similar approach that we use at Layered Insight, for example, but we go deeper, right? Because we're digging into sys, file, and network activity, right? That overhead can't impact performance as an APM, right? And so, we see similar kinds of, I think what we will see is similar kind of overhead, which is low, maybe 1% to 2%. But then you look at other solutions that are trying to tackle containers, for example, where you're trying to use a privileged container and redirecting all the container traffic through this privileged container. Think about the overhead. Think about the scalability limitations of decrypting traffic, re-encrypting traffic, trying to do old-fashioned threat detection and response. That to me has a ton of overhead. And I think people will start to realize that, we don't want to go that way. And so I think this is going to continue to play out a little bit, Paul. The WAFs have to be really low latency in what they do if they're going to continue to address the need of sitting in front of the web server and protecting the application from potential malicious users. As long as they can keep latency low, those technologies continue to scale out. But there's a lot of interesting tech that's evolving. It's trying to take an old school approach and shove it in, and I don't think they scale very well when you think about what they're trying to do.
Matt, have you looked at what NGINX is doing?
A little bit, not a lot. They were at AWS Summit. I didn't get a chance to go over and see them, but they are definitely on the forefront of the web server side in the container space. A lot of people download NGINX as that piece.
Yeah, when I think of optimized performance for my web server platform, right, I think of NGINX, and certainly migrating some of my own applications to that, it's really awesome. But I don't understand what their enterprise microservices play. They just made an announcement, and I'm still trying to figure it out, but I think they want to play in this space. And for me, that would be a great addition. Like if you're already running NGINX and now you're including that in your application that's deployed inside of a container, and I can just apply some rules to NGINX, that breeds a little more confidence. I'm not sure that's exactly what NGINX is doing, but they're definitely migrating and moving their messaging into the microservices realm.
Yeah, because the space they play really is on the web server side and kind of potentially the front end and aspects of the back end of the API communications. And so that's kind of where they fit in the microservices realm is they're playing that piece. And then there's a whole bunch of other microservices in the middle. So my guess is they're really trying to batten down the hatches in the pieces that they play in well, which is, serving up web pages and maybe RESTful API endpoints, for example. But I don't know. I haven't looked at the broader story, so I can't tell.
Cool. Well, I think that rounds out the startup news for today and the show. Thank you very much, Matt, for appearing on Business Security Weekly. And thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. We'll see you next time.